Hello, welcome to another episode of thefieldofscreamspodcast. Today we'll be talking about Halloween Resurrection. With Halloween H2O basically bringing the franchise back from Halloween 6, the Akkads knew that they were going to make another movie. Whenever they brought in Jamie Lee Curtis for H2O, they had her sign in her contract because Jamie Lee Curtis kept saying, "I need to kill Michael. Please let me kill Michael." And the Akkads were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll do the beheading scene." But they always knew they were going to retcon it. They actually shot the retcon scene right when they finished filming Halloween H2O. So, not only did they plan it, they got busy working on the next movie as soon as that was finished. Now, the scene itself, a lot of people hate, and I get why. If you're a fan of Halloween H2O, it basically kind of takes a crap on the really good ending that movie finished on. Michael Myers takes a paramedic, hits him in the throat, crushes his voice box or something, and then, swaps clothes, which is just kind of a weird thing to picture Michael Myers doing. Michael Myers walks out unscathed, and Jamie Lee Curtis ends up beheading the paramedic. And I know the paramedic, he raises his hands in H2O, no, don't swing the axe, but you think he could have just did a little more, to let Laurie know that it's not Michael Myers. They had a whole fight scene in the car, he rose up just like Michael Myers inside the car. You would just think there was something else that he could have done to signify, hey, I'm not really Michael. But then we wouldn't have the ending to H2O, so they had to do it. So the beginning takes us to a mental ward, and Laurie is of course there. She's getting medicated. And Michael Myers comes for her, just like she expected. And she wasn't really getting medicated. She was hiding the medicine inside of a doll. And I guess it was the same doll that was used in one of the first couple films. It was a little throwback. They have some throwback moments in this film. But yeah, Michael comes and, the first time I watched this movie, I was like, oh, sweet. Michael and Laurie are squaring off right from the get-go. That's pretty cool. And Laurie's running through the halls. It's a nice little chase sequence. And then she gets to the roof. And when Michael Myers gets up there, Laurie's like, "Oh, I've been expecting you, Michael." And she made this trap with a crane. And it's how did Laurie have enough time to build that? Okay, that's realistic. But rolling with it, she traps Michael. He's hanging by his foot, hanging off by the building. She's about to cut him off. And then she has PTSD because she cut off a paramedic's head, and she has to double check. And of course Michael grabs her, the rope snaps, and both of them are just kind of hanging. Laurie kisses Michael and says, "See you in hell." And then she drops and she's dead. It's a very just swift kill of, once again, a main character. This franchise has a tendency to do that. They kill Rachel off quickly in Halloween 5. Jamie got a really, really disrespectful kill in Halloween 6. They didn't even bring the actress back for that role. But then again, we have Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie, dying very quickly in Halloween Resurrection. Now, when this movie was released, the Akkads actually were like, "Oh yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis was supposed to make a brief cameo, but she liked the screenplay so much that she actually spent 3 days shooting her scenes. She wanted a larger part." And then Jamie Lee Curtis just kind of shot that down. She's like, yeah, no. This was a contractual obligation I had to fill. Whenever I signed on to do H2O, they told me they wanted to do another film afterwards. I didn't want to. But in that contract, they made me sign that I would at least be in the film for a certain amount of seconds. And this beginning here is, it's the minimum amount of time that she signed on to be on the film. So yeah, and Jamie Lee Curtis has also said this is a joke of a film. So she's not a big fan. Neither is John Carpenter. John Carpenter said this movie made him cringe. Now, following up on Jamie Lee Curtis's and John Carpenter's discuss for this film, I do want to discuss some things that I think this movie did well. One thing you could say is this movie does have a lot of kills. That is a good thing. If you have a slasher film, having a high body count, that is nice to have. I know the original Halloween did not have a large amount of kills, That one was more atmosphere, but this one, we're at the point in this franchise to where a high body count probably is important. It's nice to have. Another thing I would say is Michael Myers himself, at least in my opinion. I think the look of him is actually done okay. There's a lot of people that harp and complain about, the mask that he's wearing in certain films. And I think this is kind of a mid-tier Michael Myers. He doesn't look that goofy. I think some of his stalk scenes are good. There's times where he's lurking in the shadow. They do that well. That's kind of a staple to the Michael Myers character. So it does feel like Michael Myers is lurking around this house. The third thing I want to say this movie, I don't know if I want to say does well, but I want to give them credit for, is it has ambition. It is different. This is 2002. This is a lot of time has passed since the original. The original was a very simple story. The sequel, again, pretty simple. How many times do we need the typical Halloween atmosphere? And, some people might say, I want that every time, and fair enough. But, this movie, it takes a little courage to go outside the box and try something as different as this. They were trying to capture off of the time period to where this movie came out. During this time, Survivor was big, Big Brother, those type of game shows or reality TV shows, and there's some references to that. And I think there's at one point, there's that pervy guy character, and the girl's like, oh, you're going to get voted off the island pretty quickly. I think that's kind of a reference to Survivor, like, hey, wink, wink, we know what's going on in pop culture. But it is the franchise trying to adapt to the time, and the idea of going back to Michael Myers' house and exploring it, and then Michael Myers returning home, it's not that bad of an idea. And I am a fan of found footage, and when they do the first person shots, I kind of like the idea of it. Was it executed that well? Not really. But there are times in this film where the atmosphere, it's dark, it can get kind of creepy, and yeah, they ruin it with a lot of things they do. But I just want to give them credit for at least trying something new. Alright, I listed some positives about this film. And I do think that's important because I know somewhere out there is someone who probably does really love Halloween Resurrection. And I also know there's a lot of people that hate it. And I just sit here and I'm like, well, if I liked Halloween Resurrection, I popped in. It would be really disappointing if everyone just crapped on it. But man, this film does some things that it is very hard to look past. And I think one of the big things that I don't really like is I think a lot of the characters in this movie are just pretty bland. And I covered the Friday the 13th movie series before I took on the Halloween series. And a lot of times people are like, oh, people in that movie, they're just bodies for Jason to kill. And you could look at this one and be like, oh, it's kind of the same thing. Yeah, but no. I think the movies and the time period that they're set in can make a big factor in terms of what you're allowed to do with characters in certain movies. For example, a lot of the Friday the 13th movies, they have really cheesy characters that are over the top, and some of that's great for 80s horror. But then you get a movie that's kind of like 2002. It's a little more updated. You expect more. You don't expect the standard of 80s horror. You don't want it to meet that bar. You kind of expect a little bit more. We've had over 20 to 30 years of slasher movies. So when you make characters, you need to make good characters that we care about, that have motivations, that make you feel for them. And if you don't go that way and you make them kind of loopy or crazy, like Friday the 13th Part 5, like a character like Ethel, they really need to be out there. And in this movie, it's just kind of like, oh, this guy's kind of pervy. He wants to see her naked. Isn't that great? And it's like, not really. I don't really like him, and I don't care if he gets killed. And, it just seems like there's just bodies just to be bodies. I don't care for them. The final girl in this film, is it Sarah? Sarah's pretty boring. The actress herself can't even scream, and in the movie, Buster Rhymes, he's like, oh, I like this girl. Well, scream like that, I can't leave her out. But the actress can't even scream herself, like they had to dub the screams in. And I mean, a lot of these characters, like, they're just not very good because of the way they're written. On the rewatch, the character Miles, who his actual name is the actor Ryan Merriman. Okay. I was a 90s kid. I watched Disney movies. Luck of the Irish, that was my jam. Smart House, that was a great show. I mean, I really like this actor. Like, it's kind of a nostalgic thing. So when I see him, I was like, oh, cool. Like, I forgot he was in this movie. But as the film was going, I was like, okay, he's kind of like this, like, distant friend / boyfriend to the final girl. Like, I forget how he plays a role, but I'm sure he will play a role. And he was just kind of this side plot character. And the biggest thing he does is, like, in the final act, like, he Yahoo messages the final girl, and he's like, hey, look out, he's coming around the hallway. And he's like notifying them where Michael Myers is, and when they think he's dead, he's like messaging her like, oh, hey, he's still alive, look out. And it's like, dude, like, why would they make a character just centered on being a long distance boyfriend who's just messaging the final girl? Like, he could have called her. Like, I don't know, it's just silly. Kind of carrying off of the bad writing. I mean, the premise of them going into the house, and it's like this scary reality TV show. And, again, like, to me, like, I still think it sounds like a cool idea. And it sounds just like it was a separate type of movie, and then they, like, shoehorned Michael Myers into it. But, I mean, like, the moment where it starts to feel cheesy, it's just, you hear the name Dangertainment, and it's kind of just like, oh, geez. Like, even the name's kind of corny. And then, like, the showrunners is Tyra Banks and Buster Rhymes. Like, it's them two. Like, they're a duo. And I guess I can say these two are not bland characters. Like, they're kind of the over-the-top characters. It's just very hard to find characters that you like in this film. I don't know. Like, I have a hard time with it. But, I mean, Buster Rhymes is watching kung fu movies while he's trying to work on this show. And, like, when characters are getting killed off, like, there was a tripod kill scene that was actually pretty good. You kind of see it because the camera's mounted on it, but Michael Myers is using it to, like, stab a dude. And, like, Tyra Banks is, like, making a mocha espresso or some type of coffee drink. And, of course, like, she doesn't see it because she's, like, dancing while making the drink, and she's, like, singing along. She's just... she's in her own little world, but this always happens between them two. Like, literally, they should be seeing characters being killed, but every time they're like, ha, pour wine, have a good time. And it's like, man, these two are like the worst producers ever. Now I'll go ahead and get to, because I mean, I'm kind of crapping on the movie here. And I need to get to the main reasons why people hate this movie, because, I mean, you guys know what's coming. It's probably why you clicked on this video in the first place. You need to hear about it when you see the cover of this movie. But, I mean, the one thing that just gets everyone ticked off, and rightfully so, is when Buster Rhymes is wearing the Michael Myers outfit. Michael Myers himself follows him, and it's kind of a trippy moment at first. But, Buster Rhymes turns in, and he thinks it's some lanky who's dressed up, and he's like, what are you doing? You're going to blow this whole thing. And, like, Buster Rhymes just goes off on Michael Myers, and he's, like, poking him in the head, and he's like, get the hell out of here. And Michael Myers just listens. The same killer who doesn't hesitate at all killing anyone in his path. He listens. That's what he does. Buster Rhymes punks Michael Myers out. But it doesn't end there. Because later on in the film, when it's down to Michael Myers and the final girl and they're squaring around at it, Buster Rhymes walks in and he starts doing this jujitsu stuff. And I mean, Buster Rhymes, when he does this, he's literally going, oh, sorry if I blew out your eardrum. But I mean, the sound that I'm referencing. And he like roundhouse kicks Michael Myers, and Michael Myers goes flying back, and you're like, oh, what are we watching here? Like, where did this movie go? But then Michael Myers hops up and stabs him, and you're like, oh, okay, like he killed him. That's good. Like, enough of that. Like, he got punked out by him. You know, we don't need Busta Rhymes killing Michael Myers. They wouldn't do that, right? But Busta Rhymes survives, and he comes back again. And then he takes like these electrical wires and like shocks Michael Myers in the nuts. And we get like a close up of Michael Myers' eyes like bulging out like, whoa. And it's like, oh my God, this is getting slapstick here. And then like when he kicks him again, like Michael Myers goes flying and he makes this sound that just sounds like a whale. It's like, oh. Yeah, it's terrible. And you know, the shocking thing is, when they first were making this movie and they basically had it completed, they showed this film to a test audience. And the thing the test audience was saying, they said they wanted more Busta Rhymes in the movie. And that's why we have a lot of Busta Rhymes in Halloween Resurrection. There's a specific crowd out there that whenever they watched this movie, they wanted more Freddy. And not the cool Freddy, not Freddy Krueger. They wanted more Busta Rhymes. So that's why we have what we have. And you know, part of me kind of feels bad for Busta Rhymes, because he didn't write this movie. As much as it looks like he did, as much as it looks like Busta Rhymes sat down and was like, I'm going to come up with a cool character that knows Kung Fu, and he's going to like beat down Michael Myers. No, he didn't write it. And I think the reason why they brought him aboard is because in H2O, like LL Cool J, you know, like he was in the movie and he was a very small part. And, you know, he was kind of just a bumbling security guard and no one really complained about that. And he was on the cover and a lot of people reference that he's in that movie. So they're like, oh, you know, like we should just keep bringing more pop stars in. And, oh, yeah, Busta Rhymes, he could be in this. Oh, Tyra Banks. Like, they'll be a hit. And in Busta Rhymes' defense, if I was approached and they asked me if I wanted to be in a Halloween movie, I would definitely say yeah. And if they were like, hey, do you want to be the one who kills Michael Myers? I would be like, oh, yeah. And I think a lot of other people would also. And I mean, let's keep in mind, the guy directing this is the same guy who directed the original the second Halloween movie. So, I mean, the guy has credentials. And I mean, you know, like this brand new idea, like it seems cool. Like I probably would have been in Busta Rhymes' shoes doing his thing, thinking I was doing this awesome pop culture movie, you know, and I'm going to be the one to kill Michael Myers and people will love it and they will celebrate me kicking Michael Myers' face in and shocking his nuts. But, you know, like, no, like everyone just kind of makes fun of it and they're like, oh, Busta Rhymes. You know, it's not his fault. All right. So, overall for this movie, again, I think it's a cool idea. I think they deserve credit for trying something new. I think sometimes the atmosphere and the lighting, like they did a good job with that. But I mean, man, they got a lot wrong. And I mean, there's not really a likable character in the movie. Even if you're a fan of Luck of the Irish, you know, like it's... I don't know, like it just kind of leaves me speechless. I usually try to just talk some good things up about these movies. But Resurrection, it's hard for me. I really don't like this movie. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. You know, and if you're a Halloween fan and if you hadn't seen it, I would just try to prepare you and say, listen, man, like it's bad. And you might like it if it gets in the territory for you to where it's so bad that it's funny. And I think if there are big fans of this movie, I think that might be where this lies for them. You know, maybe it's just kind of funny. They like seeing Busta Rhymes doing the Kung Fu. But, you know, for those who kind of take the franchise a little serious, I could see why this movie angers them. And I mean, you know, movies aren't life, but it does just kind of suck to see the franchise go from H2O to this. Because after this, you know, like they had to reboot the whole thing. Like it was game over. Like the movie's called Halloween Resurrection, but it killed it. Like it didn't resurrect it at all. Like they should call it Halloween Death. because that's what it did. Like, they had to bring in Rob Zombie to try to fix things, you know. So I've been speaking of that. That's going to be the next Halloween movie we review as we go through the franchise. I've been covering them all. If you like hearing this, feel free to subscribe so you hear the next one. Feel free to give this video a like. That always helps, and I appreciate the people that do it. And again, thank you for listening. I know this isn't the most popular Halloween movie, but sometimes it's fun to hear about the bad ones and just hear people rant. And I try not to be too negative. I try to keep it fun. But man, oh man, this movie. It's something else. Well, guys, until next time.